The storm hadn't come from the sky. It had come on horseback, with rifles in hand, and smoke in their wake. Hannah Carter stood in the ruins of what had once been her home, her shawl clutched around her shoulders not for warmth, but for memory. The small cabin nestled near the salt river was still smoldering, its beams blackened, the walls broken like bones. Her husband's blood had long cooled in the dirt, darkened now by ash and rain. She didn't cry anymore. That had stopped 2 nights ago when the outlaws first arrived. 6 of them, ragged men with dead eyes and faster hands than conscience. They took everything: livestock, food, her dignity, and then her husband's life when he stood in their way. And when they were done, they left her breathing like it was a mercy. But mercy wasn't what Hannah felt now. It was something hotter, louder, fire in her veins. She buried Thomas at dawn with bare hands, the soil frozen just beneath the crust. She whispered no prayer. The land didn't listen out here. It just watched. The others in the nearby settlements were days away, and she knew the trails were watched. The outlaws didn't just pass through. They circled like wolves. She had no weapon, no horse, and a heart half hollowed by grief. But she wasn't dead. Not yet. As the sun dipped low behind the red cliffs, she gathered what remained: a canteen, a cracked map, and a hunting knife once given to her husband by an Apache friend. Then she walked. Each step away from the grave felt heavier than the last, her boots sinking into the dust of a land that had taken more than it ever gave. But she walked anyway, west toward the mountain where the old stories said warriors still lived. Men who didn't speak much, but saw everything. She didn't know what she would find, if anything at all, but something pulled at her gut like a thread tied to something far off and waiting. By nightfall, the air had turned sharp. Coyotes called across the plain, and still she walked. The escape hadn't begun when she ran. It had begun when she refused to fall. The second morning came with silence, and Hannah woke to the sting of cold against her cheeks, curled beneath a juniper bush where sleep had found her out of pity, not comfort. Her limbs ached from the unkind bed of dirt, her back stiff, mouth dry. But she rose. That's what she did now. She rose. The trail ahead twisted into rocky land, and she walked it with stubborn legs, the weight of nothing but her name and the blade at her hip. Then, before noon, she saw him. High on a ridge, still as a stone, a figure astride a dark horse. He didn't move, didn't call, just watched. She froze, heart stammering, unsure whether to flee or scream. He was too far for either. So she stared back, defiant, daring the wind to carry her fear. Moments passed. Then he turned, the horse melting into the ridge, gone like smoke. Hannah stood rooted to the spot for a long time before moving again. Each mile after felt heavier. She wasn't sure if it was fear or relief, but the image of him, tall, silent, unmoving, etched itself into her bones. That night she lit a small fire, cupping it like a secret in the hollow of a canyon wall. She didn't eat. There was little to eat. The flames whispered stories her husband once told her, about the Apache who lived as ghosts in the mountains, guardians of land and memory, men who kept the old ways and vanished when hunted. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in eyes watching. She didn't sleep. She didn't dare. But when morning came, her fire had gone out, and beside the ashes lay something impossible, a strip of dried meat wrapped in clean cloth. Her breath caught in her chest. No tracks, no footprints, just the gift. Not a threat, not a trap. A message. Someone had seen her. Someone had chosen not to let her starve. She didn't know what that meant, not yet. But for the first time in days, Hannah ate. She moved faster after that, not because she felt safe, but because she couldn't stop wondering who had left the offering. The days blurred into dust and thirst, the mountains drawing closer, more jagged with every passing hour. She drank sparingly, her canteen nearly dry, and chewed on the last of the meat with gratitude she hadn't felt since her wedding day. But the land didn't forgive the weak. One misstep sent her tumbling down a shale slope, her palms torn open on sharp rock, her ankle twisted. She cried out, the sound stolen instantly by the wind. For long minutes she lay there, eyes closed, willing the world to go away. It didn't. It never did. She sat up, gritting her teeth, wrapped her ankle with cloth torn from her skirt, and limped on. The pain grounded her, kept her present, and then the trail turned red. At first it was a drop, dried and brown, then more. Then the carcass, freshly killed deer, throat torn open, blood pooling beneath its belly. But it wasn't the kill that made her breath catch. It was the way it had been left, offered, clean, deliberate, not a predator's meal, a provider's mark. Hannah crouched beside it, wary, uncertain. The knife in her hand trembled. She could take the meat. It would save her, or she could walk away. Trust meant survival, and survival meant risk. She carved only a portion, whispering thanks to no one in particular, then moved on. That night she didn't light a fire. The meat sizzled over hot stone. She ate in silence, the stars a cold crown above her. And once again, before dawn, she woke to find him. Closer now, sitting by a fire of his own on the opposite ridge. His face was shadowed, but he didn't turn away. This time neither did she. She met him at midday, not by choice, but by the shape of the path. It narrowed into a ravine, and there he was, waiting. Not armed, not smiling, just there. The horse behind him whinnied softly, as if sensing her fear. Hannah's feet slowed, her breath came shallow. He didn't move. "You've been watching me," she said, the knife at her side more for comfort than defense. He nodded once. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking the stillness. He glanced at the sky, then back to her. "You were not meant to die out here," he said. She blinked. The words didn't come easy, but their weight landed hard. She stood rooted, the wind pushing dust across her boots, the silence between them louder than thunder. Finally, he turned, motioning for her to follow. She hesitated. She could run, could vanish into the cliffs. But her ankle throbbed, her stomach twisted with hunger, her heart whispered that running would mean dying. So she followed. They walked in silence. He moved with ease, his boots sure on the uneven ground. She limped, but he never looked back. Not until the sun dipped low, and he stopped beneath a cottonwood and pointed to a patch of moss. "Sleep," he said. She sat, watching him tend a fire. He made no move to approach her. Just cooked. Ate. Then left a portion between them and walked off to sleep by the horse. She didn't trust him, but trust had become irrelevant. She ate in silence, her hands trembling slightly, unsure if this was safety or a trap disguised as kindness. The firelight painted flickers on the canyon walls, dancing shadows that looked like memories she didn't want to revisit. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and she flinched. He didn't. He stared into the flames like they were telling him something. She lay down on the moss, the blanket rough beneath her back, and watched the stars blink into being. She wondered who he really was, and why he'd chosen not to leave her to the same death that had taken her husband. She didn't have the answers. All she knew was that she didn't feel entirely alone anymore. The next days passed in silence, their path winding through narrow valleys and cliff-shadowed canyons. He introduced himself only once. "Tasuni," he said, gesturing to his chest. She gave him her name in return. Hannah. No other words were shared, but meanings began to pass between them like smoke. Pointed glances, gestures, grunts that meant stop, go, danger. She learned how he listened to the land, the shift of birds, the scrape of wind, the pause in silence that meant something was near. He showed her how to walk quieter, how to find water where the ground seemed dry, how to leave no trace behind. But it was the canyon that changed things. They came upon a cave once used by his people, long abandoned but sacred still. He knelt beside faded markings on the wall, fingers tracing the stories written there. She didn't ask what they meant. Some things weren't for her to know. She watched him in reverence, the way he bowed his head slightly, whispering words she couldn't understand. That night, when she woke to a sound, rustling brush, snapping twig, he was already moving. His knife flashed. A man screamed. Then silence. A scout, Tasuni said, watching, marking them. There would be more. Her blood ran cold, but his didn't. We move, he said, and they did, into the dark, into danger. Together. Her ankle ached with every step, but she pushed on. She didn't ask where they were going. The way he moved made her believe he knew. They crossed rivers without bridges, climbed rocks without ropes, and every time she thought she would fall behind, he slowed just enough. Once, he handed her a piece of dried meat without a word. She took it. Their journey became a rhythm. Walk, rest, eat, listen, and each day, the space between them shrank. Not with words, but with something heavier. Trust, perhaps, or the beginnings of it. When they reached the edge of the high cliffs, and the plains stretched far beyond them, she finally spoke again. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't answer right away. Then finally he said, "Because someone once helped me." And that was all. But it was enough. The trail bent into thick forest, and the world changed. Pines rose like watchful gods, their limbs creaking under the weight of time. The scent of sap, wet bark, and crushed needles clung to Hannah's clothes, and the air felt colder, heavier. Every step forward pressed her further from the life she once knew. Tasuni walked ahead, silent as always, but his eyes moved constantly. Left, right, behind. Something was wrong. She felt it before she saw it. A crow's cry pierced the hush, and he froze, hand rising without looking back. She stopped, waited. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something watching. Later that night, as they made camp in the hollow of a fallen tree, he didn't sleep. She lay curled beneath a blanket, but her eyes never closed. He sat with his knife across his lap, staring into the dark like it owed him answers. When the first arrow struck the bark above his head, he moved without sound. He was on his feet, dragging her down, covering her with his body as a second arrow buried itself in the trunk beside them. She could hear the voices. Low, fast, foreign. Not his people. Raiders. 3 of them, maybe more. Tasuni didn't hesitate. He leapt from cover, knife in one hand, tomahawk in the other. The first man never saw him coming. The second shouted before steel silenced him. The third fled. Hannah rose slowly, ears ringing, breath caught between panic and awe. The bodies lay still in the pine needles, blood steaming in the cold. Tasuni returned to her, his face unreadable. "We don't stop anymore," he said. She nodded. No protest, no fear, just the echo of something new forming in her chest. That night, there was no fire, only the scent of blood and bark. She sat beside him, close but not touching, the silence between them heavier than anything they carried. She realized something then. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was survival, but not just hers. His, too. Their paths had twisted together, tangled like roots, and she no longer cared to pull them apart. They walked as two, but something had changed. They ran as one. The next morning, they followed the river south, its waters wide and slow, coiling through the valley like a great silver snake. Mist clung to the surface, rising in slow ribbons that blurred the edges of the world. Taksuni said nothing as he led her to the edge, his horse's hooves squelching in the soft earth. She looked at the current, then at him. "We cross?" He nodded once. "There's no bridge." He turned his horse without replying and rode in, the water rising quickly to the animal's flanks. Hannah watched, heart hammering, then followed, gripping the reins like they were a lifeline. The cold punched through her boots, numbing her legs. The current tugged with greedy fingers, but she held firm. By the time they reached the far bank, she was soaked to the bone, teeth chattering, but upright. They built no fire. They couldn't. The smoke would call the wrong eyes. Instead, he showed her how to dry her clothes by pressing them between warm stones wrapped in cloth, then waited with his back to her as she changed. No words, no glances, just space. She watched him from across the glade as the light faded, wondering how a man so hard could carry himself with such care. He handed her a pouch of herbs, gesturing to her sore ankle. She rubbed it in. The pain dulled. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home," he said simply. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. That night, they slept without interruption, but not without thoughts. She lay beneath the stars, the moon carving silver lines across Tasuni's face as he slept nearby, and she wondered what kind of man risked his life for a stranger. She didn't have the answer, but she knew what kind of woman she was becoming. No longer the settler wife waiting behind a cabin door. No longer the widow with nothing left. Here in the wild, by the river of smoke, she had become someone else. Someone the land hadn't swallowed. Someone who refused to vanish. And that meant something. Maybe not to the world, but to her, and maybe, just maybe, to him. They climbed higher now, the land sharpening into ridges that clawed at the sky. The trail narrowed, and the air grew thin, but Hannah kept pace. Her muscles burned, her lungs ached, but she didn't complain. Taksuni glanced back only once, as if to check she still followed. She did. With every step, the past fell further behind her. The cabin, the screams, the blood-soaked soil of her old life. Only the mountains remained ahead. As they crested a ridge near dusk, smoke bloomed in the distance. Not firelight, but black smoke, angry and rising. Tasuni tensed. He motioned for silence, then dropped low and signaled her to stay. She obeyed. Always now. He vanished into the brush. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun bled away. She waited, blade clutched tight, her back to a tree. When he returned, his face was stone. "Raiders, they burned one of our outposts. No survivors." Her breath caught. "Your people?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked. She followed. They moved faster now, urgency pushing them. When they finally stopped, it was by a cliff edge overlooking a narrow valley. Fires flickered below. Campfires. Dozens. Raiders. "They're waiting for someone," he said. "More coming." Hannah watched the lights dance, the enemy shadows cast against the rock. "What do we do?" she whispered. "We don't run," he said. "Not this time." She expected him to tell her to go, to leave, but he didn't. He handed her a second blade. It was smaller, lighter, fit her hand perfectly. "You don't have to," he said. "I do," she replied. It wasn't courage. It was something more. She had run from fire once and lost everything. She would not do it again. Not when she had something left to protect, even if it wasn't hers to begin with. That night, under the dark sky, they prepared. She watched as he painted his face with earth and ash, his expression unreadable but fierce. And when he turned to her, she nodded. Whatever happened next, she was ready. Not because she was brave, but because she had nothing left to fear. The fire inside her had nearly died once. Now it burned again. Dawn broke red. The trees held their breath as the valley below stirred. Tahsuni moved like smoke, his steps sure, his eyes sharp. Hannah followed, crouched low, heart pounding in her throat. They had scouted the ridge, memorized the paths, counted the sentries. Every move now was a gamble with no guarantee, but she trusted him. That alone gave her the strength to keep going. They struck just before sunrise, steel flashing in the golden light. The first campfire was snuffed in silence, the men around it dead before they could scream. Then chaos, shouts, horns, gunshots. Hannah stayed close, knife in hand, breathing smoke and blood. She didn't kill, but she didn't freeze either. She moved, dodged, warned. She mattered. Tahsuni fought like the storm, precise, brutal, unrelenting. But numbers turned. One by one they were surrounded. A shot tore past her ear. She dropped to the ground. Tahsuni roared a warning, dragged her behind a boulder. Blood slicked his arm. Not fatal, not yet. "We can't stay," she said. "We don't," he replied. He reached for a horn tied to his side and blew once. Deep, sharp, echoing. From the far cliffs it came. The response, warriors, his people. Arrows rained down, and the tide turned. The raiders broke, scattered like ash in wind. The battle ended as quickly as it began. Smoke drifted through the pines. Hannah sat, breathless, fingers shaking. Tahsuni crouched beside her, his wound wrapped in cloth, his gaze steady. "It's over," he said. "For now," she replied. And they both knew what that meant. War never ended. It only waited. But in this moment, they had won. And that was enough. They buried the fallen at the cliff's edge, each stone placed with reverence. Hannah helped, her hands raw, her shoulders aching. She didn't ask to be included, but no one stopped her. Tahsuni's people didn't speak her language, but they met her eyes without fear, without suspicion. That was enough. At night by the fire, she sat beside him, the silence between them now warm, not distant. "You can go," he said. "We'll help you reach the settlements." She didn't answer, just looked into the flames. She thought of the cabin, the blood, the silence. Then she looked at him. "And if I stay?" He said nothing. But something shifted in his eyes. She stayed. Not because she owed him. Not because she was lost, but because for the first time she wasn't. The land had tried to bury her. The world had tried to break her. But she was still here. Not the widow, not the settler. Just Hannah. And that was enough.